So, this is where we are now. Look, I don't hate The Amazing Spider-Man. It's definitely not the worst movie I've talked about on my channel. It's not the worst comic book movie I've talked about on my channel. I've talked about much worse. But with all that said, it's still a massive disappointment. Now, I know most people's complaints with this movie mainly involve Peter Parker, which, rightfully so. But I'm not gonna spend this video talking about how they didn't do the character justice. As I said before, I am fine with people taking liberties with their characters, as long as the movie is entertaining. You can change source material to better fit the universe and time period, as long as the movie is entertaining. You can branch away from the comic books completely and make your own movie entirely, as long as the movie is entertaining. Was this movie entertaining? No, it wasn't. The theater experience I had while watching this was one of the worst of my life. Like, not only was the movie bad, but like a little under halfway through, this mentally handicapped person walked in, right? And I know he can't help it, right? I'm not making fun of him, I'm just saying. And he was unsupervised. He was completely alone. And at first, he just kind of wanders around the theater, just staring at people, and no one's doing anything. So I get up, I go tell security, and I missed something, I can't remember. So I thought rewatching it may change my opinion a bit, but I think I dislike it even more now. So let's get into the Remember the two Amazing Spider-Man movies? Not the two Amazing Spider-Man movies, the two Spider-Man movies that were amazing, directed by Sam Raimi. Tobey Maguire portrayed a near-perfect Spider-Man. He's dorky. Look at his chubby cheeks. He's the perfect fit for a nerd moonlighting as a hero. He cared about his family and his friends. He'd let himself get beat to near death in order to protect everyone. He's a good, kind-hearted person. A real hero. This guy's a fucking asshole. He only cares about himself. He picks on people, skateboards through the hallways, openly disobeys his teachers, and a bunch of other stuff that I'll get into as I further review this movie. Again, I'm perfectly fine with filmmakers taking royalties with the source material. You want to make Peter a cool kid who skates through the hallways? Fine, but address that he's cool or a punk. The problem with this movie is that they play it off like he's still a nerd. This is not how nerds act. I know, I was in high school when this movie came out. People who act like this are generally considered to be punks, not nerds. In this scene with Flash Thompson, it should be Peter he's holding upside down, not a random kid. However, since Peter looks like a vampire straight out of the Twilight movies, that wouldn't make any sense. Not to mention his suit looks awful. Like, yeah, he's a teenager and probably can't afford to make a decent looking suit, but he can make web shooters with a seemingly endless supply of tensile string strong enough to support cars. He should be able to make a suit that doesn't look like a basketball. To the relationship, Emma Stone plays Gwen Stacy, and I like Emma Stone. She's given some great performances. I especially liked her in Birdman.
Things are happening in a place that you ignore. A place that, by the way, has already forgotten about you. I mean, who the fuck are you? You're doing this because you're scared to death, like the rest of us, that you don't matter. And you know what? You're right. You don't. It's not important, okay? You're not important. Get used to it.
But in this movie, her entire performance feels like it's being improvised, and not in a good way. Every other critic will say that their relationship was the best part of this movie, but to me it felt very wooden and generic. In the original, you really felt for Peter's attraction towards Mary Jane. He crushed on her forever, but she's dating a dick.
The woman I've loved since before I even liked girls. I'd like to tell you that's me next to her.
And after that ends, she starts dating Peter's best friend, and Peter has to pretend he's okay with it. Meanwhile, she starts liking Spider-Man, having no idea that Spider-Man is Peter. And in the end, when she finally falls in love with Peter, he realizes that they can't be together because he knows that that would put her life in danger. It's developed incredibly well, and we really feel for them in the end. Let me sum up the relationship in this movie now. We're introduced to them by showing Peter take pictures of her from a distance when she's not looking. Let me remind you, they aren't friends yet. That was before this conversation happened.
What's your name?
Peter. Parker. Peter Parker.
Okay, good.
Later, we see Peter put this as his wallpaper on his computer at home, which she thinks is adorable, by the way, when she finds out. Imagine if Peter looked like this. Then this would all be really creepy and she would probably report him and shit. But no, he's a high school student who looks 30 and reminds her of Edward Cullen. She literally likes him right away in this movie. No effort is put into developing the relationship, which is surprising because Mark Webb directed it, and the only movie Mark Webb had directed before this was 500 Days of Summer, a very good indie film about relationships. So why does that suck here too? So also, right after they start dating, he reveals to her that he's Spider-Man, even though her dad's the captain of the police force. Then, in my opinion, the shittiest thing Peter does in the movie, he does to Gwen.
What?
Her father dies, and as he's dying, he makes Peter promise to stay away from Gwen to keep her safe. Peter then just skips Captain Stacy's funeral without saying a word to Gwen, doesn't comfort her or anything. Then when she confronts him about it, he rudely dumps her like she did something wrong. And then 2 minutes later, he breaks the promise anyway and gets back with her. Do you see why this love story sucks in my eyes? Can I move on now? The villain. The villain in this movie is the Lizard, and I'm gonna let you guess how I feel about him. Ready? It's either A, I thought he was amazing, or B, he sucked ass. I'll give you a second to think over your answer. If you guessed A, I thought he was amazing, then you can take my amazing cock and shove it down your throat. Now, I'm a fan of the Lizard. He's always been one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. It's just super clear this movie had no idea what to do with him. His motivation is that he wants his arm to grow back, so he keeps injecting himself with this lizard serum until he turns himself into a lizard accidentally. From that moment on, any and all motivation gets thrown out the window. Now he wants to make more of this serum to shoot a laser up into the sky and release it upon the city so everyone will become lizard monsters. Do you see why I prefer Spider-Man 3 to this? Do you understand yet? It's true, I hated Topher Grace's Venom, but at least I understand why he was doing the shitty things he did. The Lizard just does shit, and he looks terrible. The design, the CGI, everything, it sucks. 4. Disappearing characters and plot lines. Yeah, people and subplots in this movie just kinda are completely forgotten about. They said this would be the untold story, yet all we're told is that he had parents. Like, okay. Irfan Khan is in this movie. We see him in a car while all this lizard shit is going down on the bridge, and then we never see him again. Whenever the Lizard is releasing his retarded chemical plan across the city, we see some cops turning into lizards. And then they're never talked about or shown again. Peter completely abandons the search for his uncle's killer after about 10 minutes. It literally just stops being a plotline and there's no resolution whatsoever. 5. It's the same movie again, only shittier this time. The idea of a reboot was stupid from the beginning and they should have just made a 4th Raimi film. It was being marketed as the untold story, but it was the same story as the first time because Uncle Ben got shot and Peter got bit by a spider and got the powers, and what's untold about this story? No, in reality, it's just the studios shitting out a Spider-Man movie to keep the rights to that character. And this movie does nothing different or better than the original in any way whatsoever. The last shot is literally the same, except this one's at night, because this movie's dark like Dark Knight. There are literally lines from this movie that were taken directly out of the original and changed ever so slightly to try and play it off as their own.
Wow, great reflexes. Thanks.
Very good. Good reflexes.
Thank you.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
Then Uncle Ben dies, because what happened? There's a guy in the store, and he stole some chocolate milk, I think. Then he's on the street and drops his gun, and then Uncle Ben tries to leap for the dude's gun. This is ironically the greatest display of irresponsibility I've ever seen in a movie like this. Why'd you do that, old man? Just walk away. If you ask me, he deserved to get shot. You don't leap towards someone's gun just because he dropped it. He was not using it on anybody. And Peter's reaction is just laughable.
Uncle Ben, Uncle Ben. Call an ambulance! Someone call an ambulance, Uncle Ben, Uncle Ben.
It's almost as bad as the video game.
Uncle Ben! No! No! Call an ambulance!
The tone of this movie is absolutely all over the place. It's so obsessed with being dark and edgy, but then they have a fucking lizard guy come out and try to turn everyone into lizards, and then it's a teenage romantic comedy, and then it's just a comedy. What the fuck was with that editing? It looks like a mistake. Then it also tries to be like a horror movie? What was that? Piano note! I'm giving this movie a lot of well-deserved shit, but it's not the worst thing ever. The scenes of Spider-Man swinging around the city look amazing. It's about time we get a POV shot of him doing so. The characters suck, but the acting is great all the way around. Except for Andrew Garfield, who seems stoned the entire movie. And the guy that played Dr. Connors, he was terrible. This movie had such potential, but it really missed the mark by a long shot. It's got good production behind it, and I respect the fact that it isn't packed with action. It's pretty funny sometimes, although a lot of the humor isn't funny at all.
Uh-oh. Somebody's been a bad lizard.
Give me a fucking break. In the end, I'll give The Amazing Spider-Man a C-. It's a huge letdown, but it just might be a masterpiece when comparing it to its sequel, The Amazing Spider-Man 2.